Hey, good morning, welcome back. It's Monday, May 29th, Memorial Day. Got a lot going on this week. Trying to get all of our late melons transplanted and our sweet potatoes transplanted this week. It looks dry all week. We really need some rain. They're talking about rain this weekend, which would be perfect if we can get through with all this. Plus, still have to take care of everything else that's going on, so it's kind of a stressful time a little bit, just trying to get everything done, but hopefully feel better about it this week once it's over. Okay, these watermelon transplants are 36 inches apart. And our rows are 38 inches apart from here to here. But we don't plant every row, so I'm going to show you our pattern. Okay, hopefully you can understand this. We take a 14 row pattern. All right, just imagine the tractor straddling right here, and I'm spraying 6 rows on each side, plus these 2. We match up the pattern with my sprayer. So we start over here. Okay, this is 1 row. This doesn't have anything. Everything with the flag is planted. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, you see we've skipped 2. And then where we drive the tractor, we skip 4, even though it only straddles 2. And then we come back with the row, skip 2 with the row, and then a blank. And then when we turn around, come the other way, then that blank will be there with another row. So for every 14 row swath, we've got 4 rows of actual melons planted, if that makes sense. Okay, we told you when we were planting the melons on the plastic, we like to have at least 25 square feet per melon. Well, these rows are closer together. The plastic rows are 12 feet 8 inches from center to center. These are about 9.5 roughly. So we spread them out farther, 3 feet instead of 2, and that gives us about the same square foot per plant. So these vines will shade out quicker because they're closer together. And then when we get ready to drive the tractor, either for harvesting or spraying, these vines are usually running across. We try to turn them some, but eventually they go all the way across, and we usually just drive over them. When we get ready to water, you know, this field all the way down, you can see the flags. These are all red meat right here. You know, we watered every row ahead of time to water everything, but when we get ready to water the melons from here on out, we'll just put 1 hole here and 1 hole here and water each side of the row, and then we'll skip this and then do the same thing here. Now we have to have these 2 rows bedded up because we have to have a furrow for the water to go through. If we knock these 2 down, then the water would just kind of meander. So we keep these 2 rows here for the water. Same thing right here. All right, another reason that we do the pattern like we do, you know, we've got a row there. All of our skips are even numbers, so like 2 and 2 and then a row. And then we skip 2 in a row. So that allows us to use our hood too, because remember our hood is 2 row. So we've already put out some chemicals just in the middles here without getting it on top of these before we planted them. We'll come back one more time with the hood, and that allows us, you know, we can do 2 rows here and do 2, 2 in a row and so on. So if we had an odd number, you know, like 3 rows between the plants, then it would not work out right. So that's another reason why we use this pattern. We got our 5th peas that we planted right next door to these melons, and you can see they're coming up. All right, between our peas and our sweet potatoes, which will start down there where the portalet is on the other side, these will all be red meat, and then we'll plant our yellow and our cantaloupe on the other side of that tractor over there. We'll do that last. Right now we're working on the red. All right, if you watched our video when we planted the okra, we're using the same rig to plant, but we're using the 36-inch wheel. You can see how it makes the holes all the way down. We just drop the plants in. We'll have to watch these little transplants pretty close. I mean, the ground's moist. See, I can make a ball with it. But it's Monday, and it'll take us about 2.5 days, and then about 2.5 days on the sweet potatoes. And then, like I said, it could rain this weekend. But it's possible we could have to water them before that, just because they don't have any root system. You know, you just want to keep it as moist as you can before they start taking off. This planting of watermelons, as far as the number of transplants, is about 50% of everything we do for the year is what we're doing this week. Everything we've planted on plastic is the other 50%, and we've divided those two into 2 plantings. So I've got a 25% that's oldest, 25% that's later, and then another 50% here. These will be ready in August, right about the time we usually close up our produce stand, or at least start running out of things like tomatoes and peaches and that kind of stuff, corn. So we can handle the volume a little better when some of that is over. So that's kind of our schedule and our plan. These watermelons, I hope, will last until Labor Day once we start harvesting. Sometimes it's a little after, and then we'll gear up into sweet potato harvest about the 3rd week of September. All right, we fast forward to Wednesday morning. We got through planting the watermelon transplants, red and yellow. Cantaloupes are not quite ready. We'll do them maybe after we get through planting the sweet potatoes. So we started on the sweet potatoes this morning, and we also decided to go ahead and turn on the water on the melons that we just planted. The rain's a little iffy at the end of the week, and I don't want to wait, so we'll water them, and if it rains, it rains. It'll be fine even if we water them. So remember, I told you we water on one side of each row on the melons. I'm going to show you. All right, we've got the flag there, you know, signifying that's a planted row. We skip that. Come over here, water that. Remember how I told you that we had to have these 2 rows to keep the water in line? You know, we can't knock those down because we got to have them. So that should make a little more sense by looking at that. You know, then we've got our tractor skip right here. This is my sweet potato planter. It's a 2-row. It's got 4 seats though. It takes 4 people to ride. It plants 2 rows. When these wheels spin, these little grabbers right here, where you lay your slips in right here. I'm going to show you when we get out to the field. I'm just going to kind of give you a little bit of a preview. This is mechanical transplanter is the brand. These wheels right here spin, and those grabbers come around, and you put your slips in, and it drops them down in the ground. So it takes 4 people to ride and 1 driver. We got a cover on over the top just to give them some shade. Right, you sit on these seats and you put your slips in these boxes. You know, you're facing backwards, and then you drop them in these little grabbers right there, 1 at a time. We usually put the sweet potato planter on our old 1086. It's got a good slow creeper gear that goes slow. I mean, you can't go very fast. You got to go pretty slow. All right, you can see they're dropping the slips right in those little grabbers. That drops them right there. You want to plant them about 3 or 4 inches deep. Planting 2 rows at a time right here. Right here are some rows we've already done. Got 4 people riding, 2 on each row. They kind of alternate. And we got to have somebody coming behind catching the skips that they miss. Try not to have any skips. All right, this is a sweet potato slip. You know, you plant it about 3 or 4 inches deep, right about where my thumb is. And then it just starts putting on roots underneath there, and that'll be where you'll eventually have your sweet potatoes. Now, this is one of the only things that I don't do myself is grow my own slips. I go pick them up from a big sweet potato farm on the other side of the state. They've got a lot of specialized equipment, and it's kind of a trick to growing the slips yourself. Not that I couldn't learn or do it, but I've always just gotten them from somebody else. It's a little easier. We're always so busy this time of year anyway. So I go pick them up from them, and they just have plant beds that they're just solid potatoes that they plant. And then all these little slips, you know, like this, come up out of those beds, and then they cut them off, and that's what you plant sweet potatoes with. So it's different than planting, you know, regular potatoes. You know, these plants right here have been planted a couple of hours. It's about lunchtime now, and you can see how they're kind of a little bit wilty looking, falling over. That's normal. What you want is to come back the next morning and see them standing up. So we'll check them in the morning and see what they look like. All right, once we get through, we'll turn around and water the potatoes just like we do the melons. And they should be good to go after that. The variety is Covington. I used to plant Covington years ago, switched to Orleans, went back to Covington. They're both very good varieties. If you were blindfolded and ate them, you'd never know the difference. It's mostly about shape and those kind of things as far as the variety goes. And Covington does good on the soil type that we have. Now we're watering the corn again. I told you last video we'd water about once a week. So it's been a week and not had any rain. This is the youngest, the last corn. You can see it's about waist high. Our second corn is a little bit bigger. And then of course the last corn has the tassel on it. If you don't know how corn is pollinated, this is the pollen on the tassel. And each little grain, each little pollen grain falls on the silk. And each one of those silk goes to one kernel of corn. And that's how corn is pollinated. That's why you don't ever want to have just 1 or 2 long rows in your garden. You know, it needs to be kind of a square to help with pollination. You know, they'll pollinate by wind or just falling on those silks. You know, the pollen of one stalk doesn't necessarily always pollinate that ear. You know, it could go across with the wind or whatever. So, like I was saying, that's why you want to have more of a square block in your garden of corn than 1 or 2 long rows. All of our ground that we irrigate, width has been precision graded, so it will fall, you know, from one end to the other without any low or high spots in the middle. So that's why the water runs right from one end to the other. I don't know that I've mentioned that yet. All right, today the guys are planting the last of the squash, our second planting, 2 rows halfway all the way down. So this will be the last thing we'll plant on the plastic. Hey, it's Thursday morning right now, and I'm planting my 6th purple hull peas. Normally this is where we stop, but I mentioned before on some of the earlier videos that I'm going to plant 2 more plantings in the next couple of weeks. That's something new for us. It'll extend the pea season out, hopefully till the end of August, maybe. I really don't know. Normally we go to about the end of July, so it should make sense that if we do a couple more plantings, we'll get another month. So we'll see. It's getting very dry. They keep dropping the rain chances for this weekend. It's getting hot, which normally is hot, but we're losing a lot of moisture. I'm hoping these peas here will come up without me having to water them in, so maybe we'll get some rain. All right, fast forward a couple of days and we got through planting the sweet potatoes. We actually ran out of slips Friday, so I had to go get some more, so we finished up Saturday instead of Friday. Got my chemical out and it rained Saturday afternoon. 3/4 of an inch here on the potato field, which is good, and we got almost 2 inches at the other place. So they didn't act like we were probably going to get any, and we ended up getting a pretty big rain. So ought to be perfect for these potatoes and the little watermelons that we just planted. Even though we watered the watermelons, we were going to water the potatoes, decided to wait and see if it rained, and it did. But you know, rain is always better than an irrigation if you can. You know, these little slips are starting to stand up. They were actually pretty tall, kind of taller than normal, so it takes a little more energy for them to stand up. But a couple of days, they'll be looking nice. They kind of go through a ugly phase kind of right at first, and then they'll take off growing. Probably in maybe 3 weeks, they'll be close to touching out in the middles. We'll probably cultivate them maybe one time right before they start running across, and then that'll be it as far as any kind of tillage. We'll have to do some hoeing later on. That's the disadvantage about all these vegetable crops, is you can't spray anything for weeds once they come up. Either you've got to mechanically till them or hoe them. All right, here's a potato slip that started putting on feeder roots. You can see all these little roots coming off, and they didn't have that when we planted them. So that's how fast they put them on. But that's why they look ugly at first, because they don't have these little feeder roots. But once they start putting them on, they hit that moisture and hit the nutrients, and that's when they start to green up and stand up, and before you know it, they're putting on some new leaves. So that's why it takes them a few days, you know, because they don't have this. And once they get those, then they're off and running. Today's June the 4th. This upcoming week, we're gonna spend as much time as we can hoeing in our plastic crops and some of our peas, putting out some more string on cucumbers and tomatoes and the little peppers, and before you know it, we're gonna have stuff ready. So we do as much hoeing as we can right before we start harvesting, because once we start harvesting, we don't really have time to do it. So it's all getting ready on us fast. Pretty soon we'll switch gears into harvest and the selling and all the process that goes on there. We've got our coolers serviced, ready to go. I've still got other things to do to get my setup ready and get everything set up for our retail and our wholesale spot. So that's kind of the plan for next week. We still have to keep everything sprayed and probably won't have to do too much watering right now, but you know, it won't take long. If it gets hot, then we'll have to start watering again. You know, if y'all been watching all the way from the beginning, you've kind of got an idea of the process it takes for us to get to this point. Certainly 20 minutes of a video out of a week doesn't give you everything, but at least you kind of get an idea. Only thing left we have to plant is our last 2 plantings of peas. We'll probably do one around the 10th of June and maybe another one around the 20th. We'll have to put out some fertilizer on those 2 plantings this week probably before we plant them. And then that'll be all of our planting. You know, since the beginning of 2023, which is now we're into June, you know, we've had 0 income. So farmers spend so much money putting money into their crops and taking care of them and doing everything you got to do, and sometimes more than you want to do, before, you know, you get any money back. So I'm certainly ready for the money to start coming in instead of going out, because it gets expensive, not just for me, but for everybody. So on that note, we'll wrap it up and see y'all next time. Thanks.